Here we are once again, new episode of Read More Comics, Moore. Today we're going to discuss Miracleman number 6. Got Tom Scioli here, Jim Mahfood, and Benjamin Mara. So this is the first episode, the first issue that contains new material. We basically can talk about this issue as a whole rather than in like individual little chapter pieces. Chuck Austin's the guy who we have on deck to do the artwork here, but he calls himself Chuck Beckham.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had to change his name after the debacle of this issue.
Oh wow! Yeah, this is a rugged cover. Like, look at this.
Oh,
crazy
great!
shit.
Yeah, Tim Truman. It's amazing. This, I mean, I could stare at this cover all day.
Yeah. It looks like he used some ink wash with photostat and good lighting and shit.
Yeah, it says for Reed Crandall. So I don't know if this is like referencing some famous Reed Crandall cover that I'm not aware of. Or if he, or if he just had Reed Crandall on his mind at the time.
Here's going to be a question I'm going to ask you guys about this issue, because it was kind of unclear to me, reading all these issues up to now. I'm going to ask you guys, what the fuck is the point of Evelyn Cream? Who is he and what is he? What was the purpose?
Well, I mean, I think Alan Moore came up with the idea of Miracle Dog or Marvel Dog spitting out sapphire teeth, and he worked backwards from there.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. I mean, the purpose of his character is to be the thing that delivers Miracleman to, to Emil and Liz eventually. But yeah, other than that, it's kind of like, oh, well, I guess with this issue, that's the end of Cream.
No wonder.
Oh well.
No wonder it never stuck
it's
with
unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, he is like exposition. He's like, okay, pointing the way to this and pointing the way to that. Maybe in like he's like a border guardian in sort of hero's journey kind of stuff or whatever.
Ooh,
and then
in Shakespeare, they call that the interlocutor.
Okay, yeah, and once his function is done, then he's done.
He almost becomes like Miracleman's modern sidekick for a while, and is just ultimately like a failed sidekick.
Mm-hmm. The Evelyn Cream character to me is evidence that we're still dealing with a young Alan Moore. Like this is something that doesn't bear much fruit, and in the greater whole, it's a very great run. Like anybody, any of the job writers of the day would be happy to have written this, but that's like the one piece that's just kind of like a dangling thread. It's like,
I mean, I'm gonna make the counter argument.
Yes, please.
That this is to show you that if you get close to this Miracleman guy, you're gonna die. If you're friends, if he's your friend, like everybody in his orbit is done. And that has like that comes up in Watchmen also, where like everybody around Dr. Manhattan gets cancer. It's like there can only be one of these guys. And I mean, you could like extrapolate this into sort of like real world equivalents to that. Like if somebody's sort of like a charismatic narcissist or whatever, you might think you might get some temporary advantage by associating yourself with them, but by the end you're gonna get burned. That guy's gonna come out unscathed, and you're gonna get burned.
I was just watching this like 5 or 6 part documentary on the Grateful Dead and on Amazon Prime, and there's one part where they're just like the Grateful Dead left a bunch of bodies in their wake, just from like roadies and like people that just came into their orbit and just couldn't handle like just the permissive lifestyle and drugs and just like the lack of just the chaos that was sort of surrounding the band.
Yeah, the moth that's drawn to the flame and burns is a motif of this series. So it's like that he's the flame, and then we're all the moths, and of course it's like hinting towards Liz, like what's going to happen to Liz, because she's the closest person to him.
Right. In terms of like just pure comic books, though, I think Alan Moore is having some fun here, though. I mean, the way that he just gets rid of Cream. I mean, Cream gets beheaded by a giant monster dog. And the visual of that, the storytelling of that, of seeing his head, the camera pulls back, he's aware that he's been beheaded, right before he dies and is, you know, chewed up by the dog. So just from a comics storytelling point of view, I think Moore is sort of just maybe having a little bit of fun here as well. It's a visual medium. He's going to do something to like freak the readers out, you know.
It's an Eisner thing. I think like Eisner had that How to Do Comics or whatever it's called that he did around this time, and he would talk about like dripping water from a faucet and different things that are cues to how much time has passed between panels, and that droplet of blood that slowly goes. I feel like Moore was just test driving that in like the most extreme way possible. That we're going to extend this second into, you know, like, I don't know, like 15 pages or whatever it ends up being.
Yeah. Good point.
So when you have a godlike character like Miracleman, it's you got to come up with some sort of obstacle. Like when they created Superman, they needed to come up with kryptonite to just have something in his way. We know that good vanquishes evil, all of that bullshit. But Superman needed something to just give us a little drama as readers, man. So this is another example of Alan Moore trying to like build in some of those restrictions and obstacles. In issue 1, we saw that whenever he changes to Miracleman, he can basically burn everybody around him in a certain area of effect. And in this issue, we discover that there's like a secret word or whatever, a safe word that one says, man, to kind of keep him that impotent, doughy Mike Moran character. You could tell that Moore is thinking.
Yeah. And can we also talk about how this issue starts off on page 1 with this fantastic storytelling, lighting, very dramatic. And then page 2 is a splash page of Miracleman tearing through this structure, and his body, he looks like a contorted, psychopathic, like banshee type character or something. You know, it's almost disturbing imagery, but really effective in knowing that like the shit's about to hit the fan.
For sure, it's like the extended proportions of the figure. It's almost like selling the idea of like a blurred motion or something.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just gonna say that is like that distortion is almost more effective than any speed lines. Like because like if you were going to like capture that motion, just like seeing it with your naked eye, like it might have that kind of distortion in your memory.
Yeah, his limbs are getting kind of like tangled up. And,
like they're, you know, like one leg is in a different time zone than the other leg, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And the
very, very effective, very interesting, bizarre imagery.
And that,
it's not a very heroic pose either. He almost looks like he's almost like tied up or something, you know, tied up by his speed force or something.
Yeah, it reminds me of like when the Genesis baby kind of like leaves heaven in the first Preacher. It's just this like whiny fireball.
Yeah.
Which hey boys, make sure you read your Preacher comics, man, because we're gonna have to tackle do like a macro Preacher episode in 2020.
I started reading it, Ed, because you started.
Yeah, great.
Talking about it.
If you guys need copies, like let me know and I'll get you all the copies you need.
Dude, Preacher's in my top 5 of all time, so anytime you want to talk Preacher, I am totally down for that.
Yeah, preach more comics.
yes.
You know, this it's worth noting that this panel, the splash page where Miracle Dog shows up. If you were reading this in Warrior magazine, that's the end of the series. You know, it's a couple years before you get any kind of closure, you know, like it's like, okay, like, and that's a pretty great cliffhanger where how's he going to get out of this? He is about to get killed. And knowing Alan Moore, maybe that's how the story's going to end. Maybe it is going to be, you know, Miracleman is just going to be, you know, dog food.
Yeah, that's the final page of the Miracleman story. You know, that's kind of punk rock.
Yeah, totally.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Let me ask you.
So it was a 2-year gap between this image and then the next installment coming out.
Yeah, it was. I mean, this was where Warrior magazine ended. Like this is where, you know, where the story ended in Warrior magazine, and then I don't know how many years had passed, but it was you know, a couple years.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to read the pitch that you sent over, Ed. What did Moore say about the ending in the pitch?
He didn't really have like he got you into like the first couple issues. I don't even think he mentioned Evelyn Cream either.
No.
And so
Okay.
he had this like he starts with Gargunza and he tells you about the whole like that plot of things, but then it's like, hey, let's see where this goes. Maybe he was holding his cards close to his vest or whatever, but I think maybe he just had this really great, premise and was ready to, flesh it out more, if need be.
It sounds like stuff like Evelyn Cream and some other elements could have just been stuff that he was coming up with on the fly then, and
Yeah, he said he wanted to juxtapose 50s naivety with sort of 80s cynicism, and to contrast him with sort of like 80s characters. So I'm thinking Evelyn Cream was like his idea of like an 80s character.
Right.
And talking about like his kryptonite or whatever, I'd say Miracleman's kryptonite is his naivety. Mm-hmm. The way he like stumbles into situations thinking he's got all the answers and he realizes he doesn't know anything.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And once he gets transformed back into Mike, he really can't do anything. Like, he really doesn't know anything.
And this is where we get into that Chuck Beckham artwork. Probably the roughest artwork of the series up to now. Man.
Oh yeah. I mean, I imagine like what the story behind the story is, because he was very quickly replaced by Rick Veitch and then John Totleben. So I'm thinking Alan Moore threw a shit fit after he saw that, because it kills the mood. I'm a fan of Chuck Austen. I've seen a lot of cool Chuck Austen art, and this must be some early like learning the ropes kind of things. And right off the bat, he forgets that like black ink is what sells this book. He takes this nighttime scene and puts it at like dusk or dawn, or it's an orange sky.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It's especially compared to the other artists that have been working on this series so far.
Yeah,
the lettering is also pretty hard to look at.
Yeah. It's like Eclipse Comics, newish to the scene. Yeah. They were around a couple years or whatever. They got a golden goose by getting this license, and they're in kind of corporate fashion. They're trying to get this thing together at the cheapest rates or something, man. Jimmy and I, we're covering Wizard magazines, and there was this Neil Gaiman interview where Neil and Michael Zulli, they went over to Marvel to do this Alice Cooper book, and Marvel would not pay Todd Klein's lettering fee. So Zulli and Neil Gaiman had to agree to each chip in $10 off their own page rate to pay Todd Klein's lettering fee, which was whatever it was plus $20 that Marvel would not pay.
Whoa, that's crazy.
So to date here, the only real credits that Chuck Austen has is a series called Hero Sandwich for I think maybe slave labor, but that might even come later. This might be one of the first things he's done. And good for you, man. You get to fucking work with Alan Moore.
Yeah, right out of the gate.
Yeah. So he's got a task like Sisyphus, if I've ever heard.
Right.
Here's what I do like. Now that Moore has more pages to tell his story, the pacing is definitely opened up a whole lot by virtue of having another 15 pages to play with.
Yeah, there's definitely more breathing room in this issue, and slightly more open and airy transitions happening.
And
it's a good lesson in how many happy accidents came from that thing of making something for black and white for a larger format and then shrinking it down. It had a look unlike any other comic, and then once that section's done, it's like business as usual. It's just conventional comic book layouts, conventional proportions and spatial relationships, and it I think it falls flat. As a teenager reading this and being a big fan of this stuff, I was kind of crushed when I got to that part,
to this issue.
To that part, to that issue, because it's what happened, and this is the big payoff. This is everything's been building towards this, and it's man, what a letdown. So, sorry, Chuck. I love you.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's anticlimactic in a way for something that should be incredibly climactic. You know what I mean?
I look at this stuff though, and even just like looking at it right now, just flipping through it, I kind of feel like a connection to how it's executed. Yeah. Like I don't even know if I could do any better, you know, in this situation at all.
Well, when he...
so I have this almost like pity for it at the same time, you know, like sympathy for Chuck Austin or
Beckham, yeah.
Chuck Beckham in this position.
Yeah, when he puts on those lokes, man, it is very Amwad-ish.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not too many steps away.
I don't feel any irony in this, though. No. You know, this is like, you know, doing his best.
The British guys, when they came over, when they invaded, if you will, they didn't necessarily have all the greatest luck when it came to the artists. There's the Grant Morrison Animal Man run that everybody likes. That Chad Truog dude, that art is garbage. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I love that art. I love it, but I love bad art. So
I'm glad we have you on the record.
Yeah, Ben, I have a couple comics I gotta point you towards.
Please send them my way. I think that this is actually my own kryptonite. Is that I love bad art, inspired to like bad art, and that is like sabotaging certain opportunities.
I am glad that we have that on the record. But
that's amazing.
But even when you look at Gaiman's Sandman comics, a lot of the art falls flat.
Pursuant to your point about Gaiman, I wouldn't be surprised if after this, Alan Moore started paying people out of pocket, where he's like, "Fuck this, fuck your budget. I need good art on this. I'll just pay, Rick Veitch. I'll, pay him out of pocket. I'll pay John Totalman because I want my guys on this, and you guys are blowing it."
Yeah. Well, in that original pitch that Alan wrote, he says, "I see the artists. I see Dave Gibbons or John Totalman, right, as the potential artist to really make this stuff sing." So he sort of knew what direction it needed to go in. I'm assuming he was probably happy with, the first couple guys, but then maybe it gets to this issue and things are slightly getting out of his control or
it's being done across the pond,
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to imagine, like, in an earlier episode that we all recorded, the question was put out there, I think by you, Jim. What would you guys do if you got hold of an Alan Moore script, all of that? And we all were like bumbling around and nervous about the idea. Like, we would do it, but everybody was like stuttering and stammering. And we all have at least a decade in the game. And this poor Chuck Austin is like a doe-eyed little noob. And now he gets a fucking script where it's super dense with material. And go on, kid. Long distance call. There was no Skype.
Right.
So what's he going to do, man? He's making $100 a page or something, if he's lucky. Is he going to use a portion of that money to call across the pond to get clarification from Alan Moore? I'm sure not. There's a lot. See, us as readers, like, we look at it one way, but us as makers, you could kind of sympathize with the restrictions that were afforded to him at that time in the 80s. Like, reference materials hard to come by to start.
He probably had like a crazy deadline. Meanwhile, Moore has been meditating on this next move for like 2 years. And
it is a pretty simple issue. We need to. Evelyn Cream served his purpose. We need to get rid of him. I think Moore must have gotten some, just like, the character's a weird character. There's all this weird racial stuff with the voodoo and Cream is what like, there's all this weird shit with this Evelyn Cream character. Something tells me he's getting a little more woke and is just like, I gotta get I
gotta exit this.
Just
cut
pull
this,
the ripcord and fucking let's move forward, pretend like this didn't happen or something like that, man.
Yeah, I made a note of that too, where he was like having these almost like Sambo-esque delusions in his dreams or something. The jungle was inciting these like racially sensitive dreams for him or something. I don't know. It was kind of an odd thing. And at the same time, Gargunza was also having, nightmares about everything going on. So it's probably best that Cream bit the dust at this point.
I mean, I think Moore was probably trying to deconstruct some of the inherent racism in the adventure story genre period, and that he maybe like bit off more than he could chew with that. He was doing his best or whatever, but it just it was his reach exceeded his grasp.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, when you put it in that context, like I get it, because it's like there's always like the guide who the hero character comes across who the guide brings him. It's Indiana Jones like finds this temple because like this local tribe like brings him there and shit like that. So like maybe part of it is that. I wonder if political sensibilities of Britain and America differ enough that made him nervous about keeping down that track or something, because he's now making American comics and he has no idea if these shits are going to hit his shores.
It's like a colonialist fantasy, which is like a very like British, tradition. And he has sort of revisited elements of that in especially because I feel like it directly references Alan Quatermain, so which he has like revisited with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, these like same themes.
Yeah, so that's the Chuck Austen piece, man. That's a kind of calm before the storm, because shit is going to get real wild in future issues. I think Beckham is going to be around for a little while longer, but I think he's gonna sharpen up a little bit. The kid's learning a lot, man.
Yeah.
But we end
trial by fire.
We end this Eclipse issue with a young Miracleman strip, and this strip came much earlier in the Warrior Comics run than it does here, at least in some of the collections that I've seen. But it's a fun little ditty, another John Ridgway piece where it's a silent comic, or wordless, we shall.
Yeah, mostly except for Miracleman.
Yeah, and some signage and whatnot, sound effects. But he's trying to impress Betty Brant, Lois Lane.
Yeah,
flies off to some alien place, man, and our hero robs a princess of some other world, bypasses the Federales, the international, the Green Lantern Corps, and brings her back this locket. But homegirl ain't impressed, man.
Not at all. He gets dissed. But shit, man, the storytelling starting on page 3 of this, with him leaving the Earth and the swooping spaceships and all the outer space kind of fun Flash Gordon-esque action, is really well done. Really cool stuff to look at. I enjoy this kind of stuff a lot.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the fucking head too, Jimmy, because this guy's artwork, he's harkening back to like the Mac Royboy, Alex Raymond kind of style.
Yeah, Captain Marvel Jr., which this character is a direct analog.
Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the freaking head right there, man.
Yeah, this is John Ridgway again drawing this stuff, and he's like the perfect artist for this style of story.
Yeah, it's really complete.
Yeah, there's interesting thematic things going on, because it's kind of like, like Mike Moran is like the adult Miracleman, and then these ones are like, you have like Johnny Bates, who's just like a child, and then this one, young Miracleman, Dickie Dauntless, he's kind of like, becoming like sexually aware, but he's like super clumsy. He's trying to impress this girl, and then he goes on. This is like some hero's journey kind of stuff, where he goes to like where the treasure is. You bring him back something to like impress a girl, and he goes to where the treasure is, but like you can't take the treasure out of the temple. Like once you bring it to the light of day, it like evaporates, it turns into water. And it also kind of makes me think of like, some like nerdy comics fan who's like trying to impress a girl by like telling her about like his knowledge, his like deep knowledge of like, Superboy or something, It kind of reminds me, he thinks he's going to be impressed with this like, thing he brought from another planet. And he opens them and it's limp. It's this thing that was hard and crystal has turned wet and slop. It's like, it's just great. It's like there's so much more it seems like a very simple story, a very sweet story, but there's like so much going on here. Very understated, just really wonderful.
Yeah,
right.
He's like the more adolescent, like you said, the more adolescent of the Miracleman family, teenager. And on page 4 of this too, panel 3, it almost looks like it's a sexual thing where he's like reaching for her breast or something. Yeah. And it's like, no, he's just stealing her necklace. But for a brief moment, there's like a quick second of like, oh, this doesn't feel like it would fit with this adventure style comic. Like what's happening here? It's like, no, he has other intentions. He's just stealing her shit. But for a second, it's kind of set up like, this could be something naughtier or something.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about comics is that it's like a continuum of still images, but they still exist as still images. So you can have a moment that in the context makes total sense, works great. But if you take it out of the context, that's a very different image if you just like sort of posted that on Instagram or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's what I was trying to get at. You just explained it more intellectually. Thank you.
So Warrior Magazine ended in January of '85. We're into 1986 here. Do we know if Miracleman was in every issue of Warrior? I sort of don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because it's like if we have, what's the math, man? 5 issues and 4 chapters apiece, man, that's 20. So it's possible that it ended in '84. And now it's 86. Alan Moore has to kind of dust himself off and dust off this old idea.
Sure, yeah.
So, and he's written a bunch of comics in the meantime, man. We'll give him this one preamble comic to like get to know his characters again.
Mm-hmm.
But next issue is going to launch into things in a cooler way. Chuck Austin shit is way more on point.
Yeah. He took some notes.
Yeah, there's some good outlaw elements that we'll be seeing that feel very Mara-ish. That we'll get into, man. I think the readers will dig that stuff, man. Do you guys have any other notes on this issue before we split?
I'm good. Good to go.
Quick one. You have this pin-up in the back by Chuck Beckham, and he did understand that the secret to the success of this comic was a lot of black ink. He did know that for this pin-up. He just didn't apply that to the rest of it.
Yeah, he might have drawn that at the end.
Yeah, I think this is how he got the job. He like did a pin-up. And this like really impressed the editors, and they're like, "Okay, this is."
I've been there, man. Where like when I was doing stuff for Harvey Pekar as a kid, I did a 4-pager, and I had basically all the time in the world, and I did my best, and he dug it, and then I get a call. Do you want to do a lot of work in a really short amount of time? And it was like 28 pages in like 24 days or something. So I didn't even get a day a page. Plus there was interim periods where he wanted to see like pencils, so it's like. Had to pencil 12 pages, send them off, and then you have to hack. Like when you're doing a job, and you're laying down for that 3 count, man. Like time is not on your side. So
yeah, well, your story is typical of like, well, welcome to comics, kid.
Totally.
Like, here's your first big shot. It's going to be intense,
Jimmy, I was revisiting the Clerks comics too, man, and like. We got to get you on the record talking about that stuff specifically because I have so many questions, man.
Yeah, it's like a historic era.
Yeah, and
I have some. I mean, I don't mean this in a bragging way, but I have some incredible stories from that era. When I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy that all that even happened. So we'll do that when I come out to Pittsburgh.
Sounds good, man. Let's do some plugs and get the heck out of here. Tom, why don't you start it off?
Tom Sholey at Twitter, Tom_Sholey on Instagram. Fantastic Four Grand Design coming out the 3rd week of January. And then Free Comic Book Day, Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
Jim Mahfood, hit him.
Yes, jimmahfood.com for merch needs. Jim Mahfood on Instagram and Twitter.
Benjamin Mara, let them know where they could get some cool shit, dude.
BenjaminMara.com, and just search for me, Benjamin Mara, on Instagram and Twitter. All my stuff can be found in comic book stores, Fantagraphics website, and on Amazon.
Word up, man. And everybody, add yourselves to the Cartoonist Kayfabe mailing list. We're starting to do giveaways. We're going to be updating that maybe like every 2 weeks or so. And in the meantime, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell icon. We'll let you know when new videos are available. And in the meantime, read more comics. Moore.